Okay, thank you. Mr. Carmichael.
Good afternoon. Good to be with you. My name is Tim Carmichael. I'm the president of the California Natural Gas Vehicle Coalition. Thank you for inviting me to participate today. Let me start by directing you to the first of the two slides that I provided to you. That's it. I just wanted to give you a quick reference of who I work with in my membership that are interested in advancing natural gas as a transportation fuel. Your staff was kind enough to provide us with some prompter questions. In my mind, I simplified those to two basic points that you were getting at. One is, what do we think is working well or pretty well, and what do we think is not working so well in this general area of state programs? Several of the incentive and regulatory programs I'm familiar with are working pretty well to expand the availability of clean fuels and increase the use of alternative fuel vehicles in California. These include the California Energy Commission's Alternative and Renewable Fuel and Vehicle Technology Program, or as many people refer to it, AB 118 or AB 8 program, the Low Carbon Fuel Standard program at the Air Resources Board, and the HOV Lane Clean Sticker Program. Clean Car Sticker Program. There are others, and I imagine some of my colleagues are going to speak to those. When I say working pretty well, that doesn't mean there isn't room for improvement. In fact, I believe all of the speakers today and many of our colleagues are regularly working to improve these programs through use of better metrics, simpler administration, and using the latest information on technology advancement. I'm happy to answer questions about these programs, but I want to use the rest of my time to highlight two areas where I think California's program is weak and really needs a lot of attention. The first is heavy-duty trucks. And when we talk about heavy-duty trucks, we're talking about Class 7 and 8 trucks. Most people would know those as big rigs or 18-wheelers. There are hundreds of thousands of these on California's roads. Richard Corey already noted what a major source they are of greenhouse gas emissions, as well as NOx or smog-forming emissions. And a couple people asked about, air pollution in the San Joaquin Valley and the South Coast. Heavy-duty trucks are, the primary and expected to be the primary source for at least the next decade. The problem I want to highlight is that California does not really have a near-term or mid-term strategy for reducing emissions from heavy-duty trucks. When I say near-term, to me, that's the next 5 years. When I say mid-term, that's the next 10 to 15 years. And I think other speakers have already highlighted how much is being invested and how much thinking is going into long-term strategies. And I think that's, that's accurate. There's a lot of effort going into that. I think at the expense, in some cases, of a near and term strategy, and in fact, missed opportunities in the near and midterm. The Brown administration, as I think everyone in the room knows, has been very, very, very focused on zero-emission technologies, such as hydrogen fuel cells and battery electric vehicles. I am not in any way arguing against these technologies. I believe California should continue to invest in their development and demonstration. But it's important to recognize for heavy-duty trucks, these technologies are still a long ways off. And ARB's own technology assessment found that. It's still underway, but the initial findings were that it's unlikely that we will have zero-emission technologies for heavy-duty truck applications until sometime after 2030. That's beyond my midterm time frame. And that's, again, we should continue to invest in the development of these. But there's a lot more that can be done in the next 5 years to provide incentives for clean trucks, including natural gas trucks. Many heavy-duty trucks operate in highly impacted, disadvantaged communities throughout the state. Thus, these investments will have both environmental and economic benefits for the companies using these clean trucks, as well as the communities that they operate in, and in fact, for everyone in California. There's a benefit across the state from cleaning up the truck system. These same trucks are running in, the natural gas trucks that I'm focused on, or I want you to focus a little bit on. These same trucks are running in California on renewable natural gas wherever it's available. This is great news because renewable natural gas is one of the lowest carbon fuels that the Air Resources Board has identified. And just to be clear, renewable natural gas is a term the industry uses interchangeably with biomethane. It's a gaseous fuel that comes from waste streams. It can come from a landfill, it can come from pre-landfill waste, it can come from agricultural waste, municipal solid waste, wastewater treatment facilities, a lot of different feedstocks for creating biomethane and renewable natural gas that can be used in transportation or other uses. These trucks are we're also in the development phase of the next generation low NOx or low smog forming natural gas engines, which we will believe will be available by 2018 and possibly sooner. We believe these near-term investments in natural gas trucks are very important for multiple California goals, but they're critical to achieve some of the more prominent goals that we've been talking about. The low carbon fuel standard, for example. My second slide, if you'd flip to that, is a pie chart from the Air Resources Board's board meeting in February. And I share this with you to look at the 2020, this is a illustrative scenario, and it's important to see it as that. The pie on the right is a way to comply with the low carbon fuel standard in 2020. What I want to point out to you is the significant contribution of the orange piece of the pie at the bottom, which is from renewable and conventional natural gas. This is not locked in. It doesn't have to be this way. But I think the more people you talk to, the more you'll find that if we don't have a significant contribution for renewable natural gas replacing diesel in the heavy-duty truck sector, it's going to be that much harder to achieve compliance with the low carbon fuel standard. The State Implementation Plan, or SIPs, there are 2023 deadlines, 2032 deadlines, and low NOx heavy-duty engines are going to be a critical piece of the strategy to achieve those. Talk to the air districts. They're going to, I believe, confirm that vehemently. And the third point is the one that's already been addressed by a few people, the emerging goal of a 50% reduction in petroleum. You talk to by 2030, you talk to the trucking industry, and they think that's possible, but they have a hard time seeing how we get there without a significant increase in the use of natural gas in the truck sector. Our industry recognizes that some are very concerned about methane emissions from natural gas, from the natural gas system as a whole. Our member companies and many others are working with government agencies and environmental organizations to identify problems and address them as quickly as possible. The second area which I want to flag for you, where I think California is weak and could be doing much better, is in the development of biofuels in general and renewable natural gas in particular. And where we're not doing enough to incentivize or invest in renewable natural gas fuel production, distribution, and use. There are several studies out in the last year that are talking about the tremendous potential to produce this fuel in California. Some of them predicting more than 2 billion gallons a year could be produced, and that in the context of 14 or 15 million gallons of gasoline use each year, 3 to 4, sorry, I said million, I meant billion. These are all billions. More than 2 billion in renewable natural gas production potential in the state, 14 or 15 billion gallons of gasoline usage, 3 or 4 billion gallons of diesel usage in the state. So 2 billion is a significant number if we're trying to go after the petroleum pie. And then my two final points. We're not going to achieve the potential of renewable natural gas without significantly more investment from the public and from public agencies and from the private sector. And the next 5 to 10 years is a critical period for that. My parting thought is, as your discussion on these issues continues, I strongly encourage you to include the California Trucking Association, the railroads, the ports, and some of the big shipping companies. I say that because these are the sectors we are counting on to not only try, but to embrace the clean technologies and clean fuels that we're all talking about today. If they're not on board, we're not going to get there. Thank you again for the invitation to be here.
Catherine.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you, Chairman Bell and Chairman Wachowski, Senator, members of the committee, for having me and for accommodating my lovely ski accident that I'm recovering from. I kind of forgot that I was not 20 and I was 58. So thank you for having me. I'm Catherine Reheis-Boyd, and I represent the Western States Petroleum Association. And our association, for those of you who are not familiar, hopefully you are, but we make up the state's major oil producers and refiners that are responsible for nearly 100% of all the gasoline, diesel, jet fuel sold in the state of California. So we have, I think, a unique perspective to bring today, and hopefully a contribution to make to this discussion. And I'm so glad to hear that my friends at the auto industry also have some concerns to express today. So our refiners, I think you know who they are: Chevron, Tesoro, Valero, Shell, Phillips 66, and ExxonMobil. They are the focus of many of the state's climate change policies. We certainly are in the stationary source of cap and trade. We are in the transportation fuels under the cap and trade. We are in the low carbon fuel standard. So we have the honor of being in many, many buckets here in this conversation. But it's also really important to understand that at the same time, we are holding the serious responsibility of supplying adequate, reliable fuels to the marketplace. And I want to get into that a little bit. It requires us to do that every day, 365 days a year. I think we've talked before about California's transportation fuel market being the third largest fuel market in the world as a state. And the only two that are in front of us are the United States of America and China. So it's a large, large market. Your constituents and our customers drive 26 million cars and over 1 million medium and heavy-duty trucks that require 13 billion gallons of gasoline, 3.5 billion gallons of diesel every day. And that's, as we sit here, that's 2 million gallons of fuel every hour of every day. So we say that not just to put this into perspective when we talk about going towards 2020 and post-2020. So the need for reliable transportation fuels in California is enormous, and the benefits for reliable mobility for families and businesses in this discussion is critical. So a primary concern for our refiners as we evaluate these proposals and these fuel policies is really the potential impact this has on fuels for the state. Now, we recognize that the state certainly has the most aggressive climate change goals, and they intend to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector. That is not at debate, and we don't question that. But as decision makers, I know you are appreciative of the mobility needs of the public, and we have to consider these policies not only in their contribution to the state's climate change goals, but also to their potential impacts on the fuel supplies. Obviously, the state has deserved a reputation as a leader when it comes to innovative public policies, but when we look at the rest of the world and where they are going, it appears they are heavily relying, and this is, you know, a lot of what is being talked on the road to Paris is really policies that are relying on market mechanisms like the cap and trade program. That's what everybody's talking about. That's what's going to encourage reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, and not conversations on what we call here complementary policies that we think can be confusing, costly, and potentially contradictory, like the low carbon fuel standard. I am in a bit of disagreement with my other peers at the table on this topic. Policies like the low carbon fuel standard attempt to set sector-specific targets that really limit the flexibility to achieve the larger goals that we think not only California is after, but that the rest of the world is talking about. So if California wants others to follow its lead, we think it's essential to increase the emphasis on the cost-effective market-based policies rather than policies aimed at specific economic sectors of the economy. Now you've talked about today a suite of these regulatory programs that are already in place that are designed to aggressively force the development and deployment of alternative fuels and technologies, as well as drive fundamental changes in land use. Most of these aggressive policies certainly are in the early stages of implementation, so there is obviously some uncertainty exists with the fuel supplies, whether the manufacturers can actually do it or local governments can comply with it. But that being said, achieving the necessary emission reductions in the transportation sector to meet the California's climate change goal really is focused right now on reducing vehicle travel in SB 375. You've got 375, excuse me. You've got establishing the fuel efficiency being talked about in the CARB's Advanced Clean Cars program, the heavy-duty vehicle greenhouse gas regulations. You certainly are taking a very active role in deploying advanced technology vehicles that operate on electricity and hydrogen in the zero-emission vehicle program, which obviously we've discussed, has its challenges, but all of us were also there to support AB8 and getting hydrogen stations being located in the state. Using alternative fuels is very prominent in these regulations. You've got high-level ethanol blends, you've got natural gas, renewable natural gas, drop-in replacement fuels, renewable gasoline and diesel. All of these are very, very prominent in all of the existing regulations that we're talking about to achieve all of the goals that we are talking about. In addition, as you all know, as of January 1, 2015, fuels have been brought under the cap and trade program. And so CARB's cap and trade program, and now they're subject to a declining cap on greenhouse gas emissions. So this cap is enforceable, and it will ensure greenhouse gas emissions from transportation fuels do not exceed the amount permitted by CARB. So of the many policies we have in place today, the purpose of meeting the California's climate goals, some are intended to reduce the demand for petroleum fuels, while others will negatively impact the supply of petroleum fuels. So we're really making this clarification on focused policies that are on the demand side and not on the ones that can have negative impacts on the supply side. So demand side policies, we think, are the preferred option to look at going forward. The improved vehicle efficiencies, the focus on land use planning, including investments in public transportation, those are all more likely to meet the state's climate change goals without compromising the reliability of supply of transportation fuels for families and businesses throughout the state. So in contrast to the demand side policies, there's the low carbon fuel standard. This is a prime example of a supply side policy. It impacts the reliability of transportation fuels, and we think it should be reevaluated. It was adopted in 2007. It's halfway through its 10-year compliance period. As the committee's background paper notes, the low carbon fuel standard requires a 10% reduction in carbon intensity of transportation fuels sold in California by 2020. But that carbon intensity reduction, as you know, has been frozen at 1% since 2013. So we're very early in the impacts of this regulation as we look to a 10% as we come out of this freeze at 1%. So in fact, the compliance with low carbon fuel standard is really by ethanol blending, and most of the credits, 60% of them, are generated under the program from that. The ARB's compliance scenario for 2014 assumed that 100 million gallons of low CI sugarcane from ethanol from Brazil would be available in the California marketplace. So they assumed 100 million gallons. In 2014, 3 million gallons were sold in California. So the program is not seeing, at this point in time, its anticipated investments and subsequent commercial availability of these low CI fuels, particularly, as we all know, in the cellulosic biofuel area. So we think this program, on the supply side, it really does rely heavily on fuels and technologies that are not commercially available, and therefore they're potentially will have an impact on supply of conventional fuels to the public. Again, we really think the emphasis should be on the demand side policies, that many of which have been discussed today and which we totally support. So we do encourage a serious review of the low-carbon fuel standard before 2017. We will be coming out of the 1% freeze in 2016, and the compliance schedule is aggressive going forward. So that is, we really think that that program needs to be looked at from, as I think Chairman Bell noted, from a cost-effectiveness standpoint, where does it fall in when we look at and how close we are to already meeting the 50% reduction goals. So in conclusion, while the transportation sector certainly accounts for 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions, and we understand that has to be addressed, there are numerous policies in place today in the cap-and-trade program, in transportation fuels under the cap-and-trade program, to ensure we meet these goals. And we encourage you again to thoroughly review these existing programs. I kind of always like to know where I am before I decide where I'm going. So kind of really looking at where we are with the existing programs and then deciding what that path forward looks like. Some you will find are performing well, some are not performing as expected, and some are expensive and inefficient. So we would resist a let's throw all in the basket, let's do all of the above until we kind of look at it and rank and see where we are and how close we are, and then what we need to do to fill the gap. We encourage, again, to incorporate evaluation of the policies on how they are impacting consumers and how consumers can be protected. There is a lot being done in the electricity and natural gas side of the cap-and-trade program to protect consumers, and we think we need to look at our industry as well. We also note, and very from your questions on the coordination between committees, very happy that the CEC formed a Petroleum Market Advisory Committee. They've been having quite a few meetings, and encourage you to have them come in and talk to you also, because they're looking at all of these fuel policies. And they have indicated they want additional resources to delve into the examination of, oh great, wonderful, of the impact, see, you're already ahead of me, the impact of climate policies on fuel markets and the consumers. And that I think will be a very, very good discussion. So I would say going forward, and our members, be clear on the goals, focus on demand-side policies, many of which we've talked about. Be sure that the existing and proposed policies don't compromise the reliable supply of conventional fuels for the public, because that, those gallons are huge, and if you are not prepared to replace them, the program will be set back, and that's not what anybody wants to have happen. So. Make sure the agencies are coordinating. It's very important that everybody's in alignment on the policy and strategic goals that have been mentioned. And again, we need to rely on petroleum fuels for a very significant part of the transportation future that's going to be with us for a very long time, far longer than any of these horizons we're talking about here. And so let's just make sure we bring some more realistic expectations to the conversation as we figure out where we're going to go post-2020. So. Thank you.
All right.
Members of the committee, hello, my name is Mary Solecki. I am with E2 Environmental Entrepreneurs. Thank you for staying so long and your continued attention. In case you're not familiar with E2, we are a national community of business leaders. Our members are individuals that believe in environmental policies that are also good for the economy. We have about 600 members here in California. We started in California. We're now nationwide. And across the country, our members continue to look to California for our transportation policies because California has shown such strong leadership. Not only have we shown so much leadership, but we also have the entire suite of challenges. If you can get transportation policy right in California, you can do it anywhere, because we have such a huge fuel market and demand and diverse population in this state. The benefits of the program, some of the questions that were posed to me here today, one of them is to discuss the benefits of the programs that we see. And my members, I do have a lot of members that are private investors, and the diversification of the fuels is the biggest benefit that we have seen to date in terms of the suite of programs and policies that California has put into place. If I could crib some of Tim Carmichael's prepared materials, on his second slide, he's got the two pie charts, the 2014 diversification of fuels and a illustrative scenario in 2020. I was peeking over his shoulder. And since I'm familiar with those pie charts, I'm able to generally speak to these, just looking at how diverse of a range of fuels we are seeing. We're seeing natural gas, we're seeing electricity, we're seeing renewable diesel, more biodiesel, all kinds of benefits that in some ways, yes, we did not predict when we first set these policies and programs into place. But luckily, we set programs that were very flexible and could adapt to how the market moved in the most efficient way. And so this is a true success, in our opinion, to be able to watch the program start to diversify from where we are at 1% today to 10% in 2020. We're also seeing that we're being more efficient with the fuel that we are using. We're seeing more use of public transportation, more efficiency within individual vehicles, and greater use of other fuel types. And additionally, what our members are really excited to see is this crop of new technologies scaling in the state. By and large, there are any new transportation company has some level of research and development or a scientific center located in California. And this is because that they are utilizing the research expertise of our distinguished universities, and they're taking advantage of Silicon Valley technical expertise and the significant capital access that being in California provides. These are really unique attributes of being in California, and our programs are really taking advantage of this, keeping us on the cutting edge of being able to continue to be a market leader in new technologies. In terms of the transparency of the programs, my main exposure with the programs has been with the Air Resources Board and the Energy Commission, and I've been very pleased with the transparency process in terms of the public proceedings and understanding the rules and programs before they come out. Now, in terms of the main opportunities, because I know this is where everybody's always interested to look, there's a few that I've identified here for you today. The first is to help these programs and policies be more integrated, and especially to establish some ROIs for these programs. Especially on cap and trade funding, we'd like to see that the state of California can really understand the specific return on our investments. And so establishing those types of metrics in advance of putting out significantly greater funding will be useful to us to make sure that we can understand where we're receiving the greatest benefit and therefore how to proceed in future rounds of funding. We'd also like to see more financial mechanisms to leverage private investment in the marketplace. And that's a quick little statement to encompass a lot of different things, but what we'd really like to see is not just the state of California investing, but there's a lot of companies and investors that are happy to also put their money into this market. And so come up with financial mechanisms that can help the private investment community match their dollars and also take on some of the risk with the state. One area where California isn't reaping all of the benefits of its own policies and programs is in a particular program where we've looked at is a low-carbon fuel purchase by the state from in-state facilities. Assemblymember Quirk is actually working on a really similar bill this session, but this is a program that we've put a little bit of time and research into over the years. California is doing so much to incent the production of renewable fuels in the state, and the environmental policies and the environmental benefits of renewable fuels, but we're not necessarily actually purchasing the fuels that we're helping to spur the creation of. So why shouldn't we also reap some of the benefits of being a purchaser of these fuels? We think that for state needs, it would be really valuable for some of that fuel to come from renewable sources. Finally, we think that the market certainty is an important aspect of these programs, and so continuing these programs past 2020 not only provides market certainty to renewable fuel and alternative fuel companies that are trying to scale up, but even to oil and gas providers that are also looking at how they can comply long-term, because they're also investors in these technologies and in these markets. And if they have greater certainty of where these marketplaces are going, they can also invest more wisely. And so this is providing a better investment signal across the board for all different types of investors, even for incumbent industry. I actually got ahead of myself, and that was my final point. So I really appreciate your time, and thank you. And any questions, we'd be happy to take.
Yeah, thank you very much. And for all the group, if you have any other information you would like to give us, we'd love to see that information about the perspectives you have on some of the, maybe some issues that are raised today and so forth. So I think now we'll take the public comment unless you have some questions. Thank you. Thank you.